everybody. It's great to see everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone on our call today. We're just about probably finished saying Happy New Year to everybody, but welcome back to our fifth committee vodcast, and this is the first for 2022. This is, of course, a series of conversations with strata experts about how to build effective communities. And committees. The focus of our conversations will be around the human factors rather than the legislative requirements, because we wanted to keep it more about the challenges that we continue to face and how do we solve them. We invite you to pop any questions into the chat box, but if we don't get to them, we collect them and we'll start to bring them back into our conversations in the next month. Joining us today, and thank you for coming back, is both Catherine Lezar and Nicholas Abbey. And Nick has the experience from large multi-layered subdivision, so the horizontal subdivision, and whereas Catherine has the experience of multi-storing, so the vertical subdivision, but both have that experience of being on committees and at times being office bearers of various different times, large committees, smaller committees, etc. Catherine also is the first lot owner to become president of SCA WA, and is also a passion for improvements in strata, as in sustainability, and has undertaken a number of those projects. Nick's passion is around community in particular and building community. So far we have explored with Catherine and Nick why people volunteer to be on a committee. That's in our first vodcast, and recommend that you go back and listen to that one. Their experience of joining a committee, what are the most important steps for a committee, and just recapping, there were 5 things that were identified out of that session. And the first was building relationships with the manager and the committee. The second was creating a work plan for the year and an action list to be achieved. The fourth one was creating handover from the outgoing committee to the incoming committee. The next one was having an induction pack for the committee, one for the strata manager and one for the chair. And then the most important one as well was keeping communication open and transparent. Now, this was the subject of our last podcast just before Christmas, and there we used that in particular to talk about building community through either events, newsletters, and using the sort of things that would be happening at that festive time. This time we want to just continue that conversation for one more session, because one of the outcomes of having festive seasons is, of course, the ongoing parties and dumped rubbish and lots of parking and, you know, in other words, disputes. And so, but of course, you know, disputes and still maintaining community and community spirits is a really hard thing to juggle. One of the things that you know, we need to keep focus on is the importance of that community building and how we can continue that while we're still managing that dispute process. We're going to sort of touch on as well the other stakeholders that might come into the equation, like the police, like Department of Health Services, there's even the EPA, you know, various other stakeholders that are out there as part of that dispute resolving process, but where do they fit, and when and how, if, you know, should you go there? From my experiences working with committees and as a strata manager for many years, my feeling is, and I might be wrong, but my feeling is that there's a general reluctance to get involved, and that the preference is to force people to use the formal process, probably so that it creates a barrier and probably makes it all too hard, so that hopefully it goes away. But of course, we know that it doesn't go away, and it just festers. So we've got both Nick, as I said, and Catherine here today, and this is the conversation that we're going to just touch on from the various experiences that they've had in their roles, what worked, what didn't. So, Nick, I'm going to kick off with you first. Has your committee tended to tried to get involved, or does it tend to shy away? And what was your first step?
And once again, welcome everyone. Let me just say at the outset that the committees I've been involved with, over time, we all realise together that we have a two-pronged approach. One's about common property and the other's about people. And the people component of an owners corporation sometimes has been difficult to deal with for obvious reasons, but also for some not so obvious reasons. The other thing is that some managers historically may perceive certain issues and conflicts to be private matters, or matters which have to be progressed through a formal process, as you said, Julie. And committee members may not feel that they have the skills to deal with conflicts and people issues. I mean, that's obvious. Likewise, managers may err on the side of a more formal internal complaints process and breach notices, which is already further down the track, obviously. It's not preventative by the time it gets to that as a rule. Having said that, a complaints process sometimes can deal with an issue and bring about a good resolution in the interest of all. But particularly if extra services such as conflict resolution are not budgeted for in the contract with the manager. We often expect a lot from managers that they will be all things to all people and they will provide a service. Well, they're running a business and they can't always do it because, obviously conflict resolution can be so time consuming. And yet the manager's role as an independent third party is obviously pivotal. It's amazing how often people who are involved in a conflict have never had the opportunity to discuss the issue calmly in partnership with the manager and or the mediator. That's just stating the bleeding obvious, and yet it's so commonplace. We also lack a more systematic process of sharing through perhaps an owners corporation network of good practices around community building and conflict resolution. So what can an owners corporation do? And when they actually do a brief, it might be a committee discussion, have a brief strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, challenges analysis. One of the key weaknesses identified is we're not able to nip conflicts in the bud. By the time we're aware of it, it's further down the track. So another question, what can be done in a proactive way before an internal complaints process unfolds or a breach notice to help deal with issues before they become formal complaints? A committee and a manager may become more aware of key issues and potential sources of conflict through a community survey. I love community surveys. So long as, keep them simple, they're easy to access, and all lot owners and residents can participate in it. So that we can be more proactive in dealing with conflict, including how a manager may eventually bring two or more lot owners together informally or with the help of a professional mediator to resolve an issue or a conflict. And what do I mean by a survey? It's sent to all lot owners and residents, Google Forms or SurveyMonkey. It's best to include a broad range of issues and questions in the survey, as well as how people can actually rate with high importance, specific actions or what they would like to see, or any other topics or issues of concern or interest to them. And lot owners and residents should have the option to contribute anonymously. But importantly, surveys are a way of identifying issues that lot owners and residents may find difficult to deal with directly on their own. And these could be festering over months or even years, and they might be perceived by committees and managers as being quite trivial. It might be sort of low-level noise issues, yet they have a cumulative effect and they do great harm to communities. And they include issues such as the appearance of properties, whether they're being maintained, car parking, of course, often a bugbear in so many OCs, both big and small, noise, barking dogs and cooling units, responsible pet ownership. For example, if cats are at risk of being injured by vehicles on common property or affecting other people's property, and birds, wildlife, and neighbourly relations and community safety. In fact, in a recent communities survey that we did, our committee were amazed just how much community safety was actually a major issue that was identified by lot owners. And we think, well, what's that about? So we then started exploring what were those issues and what could be done, before it becomes a formal complaint process. So in terms of my introductory comments, and look, at the end, I'll actually have 5 practical tips, but just to make this point now, it's so simple and yet can be so effective. It can inform a mediation process or another initiative such as, the community having its own strategic plan, its own goals, or having its own rules, for example. It begins with knowing your community and what the issues already are, and hopefully before they're escalated and become even more acrimonious. So nip them in the bud. Often begins with a survey. It informs the knowledge. Knowledge is power for both the manager and the committee.
Thanks, Nick. So Catherine, here I'm interested in your experience, because one of the things we've learnt over these conversations that you've been involved with 15 different buildings and committees and in different states. So and all high-rise, close living quarters. So different, still disputes, but probably different disputes to the sort that Nick's been involved in. Yes, I'm really interested as well to see how what your experience has been, and have there been any good outcomes?
Thanks, Julie. Look, there's nothing weirder than getting in the elevator with somebody you've had a dispute with, right? Because it's the two of you are there and it's all awkward and you're staring at the lift buttons and whatever. So the thing you've got to do is you've got to remember that you're living in this building. You've got more in common with your neighbours than you have with most other people in the world. You've all chosen to live there for a reason, right? And all strata disputes come back to a few basic things. You either want somebody to stop doing something, or you want to be allowed to do something, or you want to do some maintenance at your place, or you want the common property maintained. There's not really much else that really, comes into the realm of disputes. So I agree with Nick, if you nip it in the bud early, but how do you do that? So I think you've got to remove some emotion out of it. So if you happen to have somebody's phone number, you could do something like a little text that says, hey neighbour, did you know that your dog barks, 4 hours a day when you're at work? Just a did you know kind of thing, to remove the emotion out of it, not go full blast into you did this and your dog did that, and we don't want to. I think sometimes people genuinely don't know that their behaviour is affecting other people, in which case that can help a lot. Then if you're on the other side of it, and if people are complaining, right, and you're on the committee and people complain generally because they're frustrated, but the frustration comes generally from caring, right? So you're already on the front foot with them because they care about this building, they care about where they live, they care about their neighbours, they care about their community. And so you just have to tap into that. So back to your example, Julie, let's say you did have a waste problem at Christmas where people doing, inappropriate dumping in the bin room. Well, I'd just go and chat with them and say, look, we noticed this happened. Just to avoid it happening again, would you like to work with me on upgrading the bin room? Or would you like to, work with us on ways of, organising a bulky goods collection after Christmas or something, and get them involved in the thing so that then it's less of a them versus us kind of idea. I do agree it's very awkward sometimes, and not everyone's got the skills to chat with people without getting emotional. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of that. But if you can take the emotion out of it, then these conversations can all come from a place of we love where we live and we all want it to be a nice place to live.
Yeah, Catherine, that was just amazing, because there's a couple of things that just resonated with me, even in that role of the manager, because there's some real key words there. And I love that you have more in common with your neighbours than you do with anyone else. And that is so, I have a phrase where I say everyone's joined at the hip. You're basically married,
Yeah.
but coining it the other way, because that means that you're actually, you're working together. And the second point, there was also that they care. So that's really reframing, again, from the manager's perspective. That is really reframing that, because we think, oh, here we go, another complaint. Like we take it on as being, oh, what are they complaining about now? But we need to reframe it in our minds and go, these people care, and you're right. Let's get them involved, because they could be our next committee member, because compared to everyone else who doesn't turn up to meetings, doesn't vote, doesn't do anything, they are at least being engaged. So yes,
that's true. They've noticed something and they've cared enough to write an email or say something, and that's a huge bonus. A lot of people don't see it, or see it and ignore it, or whatever the thing is, but you've already got them caring.
Yes, exactly. And I agree with you about giving them a job. That's always one of my first solutions. You want to get involved? Let's get on and do with it. So I think that's really, really good, and sits in the preventative bucket. That's really trying to tackle it before it has evolved even further. And I think that's a good note for managers to think about that, about when they first receive it, the complaint, how they might reframe it before they send them the breach notice.
I'm distinguishing obviously between bullying and the people who write an email every single day, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, exactly. Now, Nick, you also used that keyword preventative. That was one comment that you made there, but you also mentioned mediator, and a mediator. And again, it is something that the manager shies away from, not because, well, one issue is, will they get paid for it? That's a different issue. I think it is just more about that skill set that, again, everyone expects that we just have every skill set imaginable and that we can fulfill these roles. But a mediator is a very special person. It isn't a judge or a jury. In other words, in acting in that role, I'm not being asked to say you have breached or you have done that. I'm actually trying to bring the parties together, so for something that they can come to agreement about and be happy, go away happy. So what are the key things in that, as that mediator, what are the key things that either, as you say, if it is the manager, even in that preventative phase, that they should be, that language that they should be using, rather than trying to, as I say, be judge and jury all at the same time?
Mediation happens in different ways too, of course. In my own experience as a committee member and a chairperson, most of the mediation work that I was involved with was with the town architect, and working with the town architect with neighbourly issues around extensions and additions to fences and so on. So these were property issues involving neighbours. And whilst the professional expertise and knowledge of the town architect came to the fore in resolving those issues, we recognised that our role, in fact, was really about conflict resolution. And in the main, we had a great success rate in doing that. Also, as a chairperson, seeking to build strong working relationships, obviously with the manager and other committee members, but also lot owners. Interacting with lot owners is not just something that happens in an AGM. Now, time permitting, we're all time poor, but, do we actually have social events? How visible are you as a chairperson or a committee member? Are your contact details provided, for example? So that if anyone has a concern or an issue, there should be no obstacle. They should not feel uncomfortable in any way in approaching either the manager or the chairperson to raise that issue. We often can be our own worst enemies. And if the committee's functioning somewhat like a secret society, well, who would even know that service exists? It also means the extent to which the manager actually profiles their people, the people component of their work, not only the common property component of their work. And so that lot owners are aware that if the manager can't deal with an issue or assist with an issue or bring the two parties together, they will certainly provide access, budget permitting, of course, and maybe subject to committee approval, engaging with the use of a professional mediator. Just make these things visible. That's all. Very simple. In my experience, most OCs, these things were not visible. Simple as that. Even just having contact details for the chairperson, or ensuring that we're able to provide services to assist with any issues, complaints or disputes before it's escalated to a formal complaints process. Then the horse is bolted, in the main.
Yes, and it's hard to come back from that as well. We'll come back to that. We'll cycle back to repairing the damage. But Catherine, in your passion for sustainability and improving, negotiation skills, of course, would be, I think, a very strong card that you hold in sort of being able to broker good outcomes. In other words, getting everyone on the bus going in the same direction, in understanding the motivation behind why people may object to something or complain about something, particularly when it's on, say, a focus of improving the building or that kind of thing. You got some thoughts around that, like, again, looking at that skill, because in that role you're really a mediator trying to bring the parties together to get a sort of a desired outcome, and understanding people's motivation is an important part of that process. How has that sort of helped you in that way?
I think that I think more than understanding people's motivation, because I find that very hard to uncover, right? I'm not sure when I'm talking to people what their motivation is really. Some people, their motivation is not to spend money. Some people, their motivation is to green their building. Some people, their motivation is that they've just lost their job. There's 1,000 motivations going on, and I find that pretty difficult to uncover. What I find easier is to take people on the journey, which is what you just said. And I think, and it comes back to Nick's point about transparency, if people don't know what the committee is up to and the people don't know what's happening, how can you on earth take them on the journey? So you end up with the situation where the committee is in one place and all the lot owners might be in a totally different place, and then they'll say no to something, and then there's a conflict because they haven't been taken on the journey. But there's also other examples. It doesn't have to be sustainability. It could be 1,000 different things. But at the moment, of course, everyone's favourite topic is COVID, and we're having trouble here having people wear their masks in the common property. And to such a point that I had an owner ring me and say, look, I just can't get these people to wear their masks. And I put a note under their door, and now they're telling me I'm the busybody, and and then I reported it to the strata manager. They don't want to do anything. I reported it to the building manager. They didn't do anything. Then I had to call the police. So the police got involved. Talk about escalating a dispute really quickly. And she said there was just no other way. There was no other mechanism to deal with it. So now that's going to be weird. If you get in the lift, those two people get in the lift together. It's going to be very weird for them, for sure.
Yes, because it's a small, it is, as they say, like a small town. It's going to be very, word will go around as to who made the complaint,
The journey for this particular lady who made the complaint, she's an elderly lady. She doesn't want to get COVID. She's very hypersensitive about all these things. And this other person who's not elderly and, whatever's going on for that other person, and they're just not on the same journey. It's a totally different path of journey. And I think that's the critical thing. To make sure everybody's understanding. It does come back to mediation 101, and I'm not a good mediator, but you do have to understand a little bit what's going on with other people, and be open, but also not expect that people have your same thinking already.
Yeah. Well, mediation 101 is that there are two buckets. One is financial and the other is principles. So people either fall into one of those two camps. So you're environmentalists. It's a principle thing. They don't care what it's going to cost. It's a principle thing. And otherwise and that's generally the thing when you're weighing up that you've got two parties and they're coming from completely two different angles. It's about finding the common ground, that they can both talk to each other on, that still fits with the principles, but means they're going to do it at the best cost possible. But yes, that's interesting. Now you touched on where the as you say, and you've touched on this now, that when it does go to the formal process, then that damage, that how do you, it's awkward going forward. It's how do you come back from that? How do we then repair a community relationship, that was what is a great had a great vibe. Everything was going well, and now something has just imploded, and it's just all suddenly changed. And COVID, might be that pinnacle for your group, because, we're seeing in society the ones who aren't supporting it and those who are, that's sort of you'd expect then a natural divide in the building. But what sort of, have you been through this in your 15 buildings? Have you been through this before, and did they recover?
Yes, we had a situation where I ended up in SAT, the tribunal, whatever your state calls the tribunal, and the building and I were actually, opposite parties to a dispute. Now, what was really interesting about that was we ended up coming to a mediated arrangement where we just agreed to disagree, and whatever. It doesn't matter what the dispute was about. The point was what the impact. So the impact was there are some people in the building. So I'm one of those people in the building. There were some other people in the building who were very upset by the decision. And we actually had a change of strata manager as well from the decision change. So some people chose to leave the situation, and some people chose to put it behind them and just get on with the next thing. And that, again, is very hard. It's a hard thing to step beyond a grievance and to really get it complete in a way that you can live and love your neighbours again. It's very hard to do that. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, Nick, we're just getting to the end now. So, your final thoughts on some of the conversations that with Christina and I were just in, and here you've got 5 top tips for us.
5. Here we go.
Woohoo!
And let me just say quickly, we're not naive about what can be achieved. Some issues will be escalated, and sometimes escalation serves to bring about a positive result in any case. But there are 5 practical things we can do to be a bit more proactive and preventative. 1, use community surveys. So easy to do, yet can be so effective. It's one of the best ways to nip issues in the bud before they escalate. Number 2, if resources permit, budget for community building events, as well as for the manager's role prior to a formal complaints process. Take that seriously, and that also means more awareness amongst committees that, these aren't just all free services. These aren't charities. You actually have a business which is providing you a professional service. And if you think that community building and conflict resolution ought to be part of that, well, provide a budget for that. But that might be as simple as organising social events like barbecues. Number 3, most OCs, and given their smallness, use model rules, which provide a framework for good practice. But an OC may develop its own rules with perhaps increased specificity and less ambiguity, so long as the rules are the product of a consultative process that enables co-ownership, not one faction in the community or lot owners imposing its will on another group of lot owners. But I'm a great believer in communities, if they want to control their own destiny, no matter what the size of the OC might be, having their own rules increasingly. And maybe we need to benchmark those more and share those more so that more OCs are able to access models which they can perhaps adapt to their own situation. Number 4, never underestimate the power of a manager as an independent third party. We often put down managers, but I've just seen too many great examples of where managers have brought parties together, sometimes very informally. So long, again, as keep on stressing that there's a budget for this if need be, and that it's promoted. The people side as distinct from the property side known as corporation and a manager's role. That we're seeing a 2-pronged approach from managers. About people, it's about property. Always has been. We know that. But how well profiled is that? And that the manager has the skills, or that more experienced managers mentor or coach beginner mediating managers, or a manager engages the services of a professional mediator if need be. Perhaps informed by an issue that's been identified in a community survey. And number 5, you know how I love to just state the bleeding obvious, that's my role, social events, such as a street barbecue. Be engaging and inclusive. A key question for a committee and a manager, do we spend enough time seeking to connect people?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a matter of finding a particular lot owner who's more than happy to do that from time to time. Look, we've all had too many experiences where you've actually seen residents who have been loggerheads about a particular issue, it might be noise or dogs barking or whatever, and then they've discovered they support the same local sporting club or whatever it is, and therefore the similarities outweigh the differences. Again, it's just so obvious, and yet, it's like the Sherlock Holmes syndrome. We often overlook the obvious. Like you need to really see these things and profile them, and they need to be at the core of a community's business. So, yep, community surveys one, resources permitting, a budget for community building events and manager's role. Number 3, yep, model rules might be sufficient, and so long as they're actually understood well, or you might have your own rules. Number 4, the power of a manager or an independent third party, never to be underestimated. So many great managers do that really well, so long as that role is sufficiently profiled. And then number 5, of course, social amends.
Yes,
I love it. I want to come and live at your building, Nick.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And I can say, Catherine, something that you mentioned too was that we love where we live. Those catchphrases are really important. And I know in my role as a manager where that is, where there are catchphrases like that are kind of developed, they become the either the opening paragraph in anything that's going out, it becomes the focus of, say, your events or your newsletters, to remind people about why they live where they live, or that their contribution is to keep the place looking good, or to keep whatever that catchphrase is. It's very powerful, and it helps with that buy-in. And again, from my experience, communities who do have those events, bringing people together, not segregating owners versus residents, because that's the whole harmony of the building are the people who are living together, not the people who own. The owning and decisions around financials, etc., that happens in the business component. That's the common property component, but the people component is, getting everybody on board, and just having that. If you've got a harmonious community, you've got very few disputes happening. It's because they're all in touch and they know then what's going on as well. So look, that's all we have time for today. I just want to say big, shout out and thank you again to Catherine and Nick. It's just fantastic to just be able to have this half hour and chat. You're giving up your time to do it. Our next one, we're going to touch on the last of our 5 original tips, which was we're going to talk about an induction pack for the committee, one that the strata manager will put together to help inform new people coming onto the committee, or totally a new committee, about everything that I'll say is like in the legal framework. Nick mentioned rules, model rules, that sort of thing, what applies to this building, how many OCs are, so that legal structure, which most people, as we know, don't know when they buy in. A lot, I found out most people only find out they're in, how many OCs they're in when they get the fee notice, So it's just that general education from that induction point of view, and also just to the chair themselves, so that they understand essentially their role, but also perhaps the limitation on it, or if there are delegations in place, again, that sort of framework part, and how do we turn that into a positive part of induction. So that's our next topic the next time we come together, and then we'll start to branch a little wider and take on some contemporary issues like our electric vehicle, and just continue with our building community even through special projects in doing that. So thanks everyone.